Okay, I think we're good to go. Rick, does everything look right?
I think so.
Okay, so welcome, fellow commissioners and staff, to the Lacey Planning Commission meeting, March 1st. Believe it or not, January and February are gone. It is March 1st. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'm looking for a motion for approval of the agenda and consent items.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, thumbs up or fingers. All righty. So moved and passed. Welcome, Gail.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, no, don't be sorry. We're glad to see you. All commissioners are in attendance. We're now open for public comments. Rick, are there thousands of citizens of Lacey watching this commission meeting tonight?
Tens. Divide by 0. No, there's nobody in attendance tonight.
Okay.
That surprises me. All righty. So commissioner reports. Kieran, anything?
Yes, thank you. I was reading about a concern in the public that some of the rents are doubling and tripling, and there's a increased concern about the availability of housing and people being able to retain their current housing based on economics. And I know that we're building a lot and hoping that that we can increase units to decrease the rents and provide more housing, but there's a concern that maybe some of those hidden homeless numbers may be increasing if the rents do continue to rise at the current rates, especially for some of the elders and seniors in our community.
All righty, thank you. Mark?
No report.
Daphne?
No report, but I've been following a little of the news about some of the homeless such, and so I'm hoping maybe Rick or somebody will be giving us a little bit of an update, so to fill out the story a little bit.
I have no doubt Rick will be doing that. Peg?
Yes, I attended the opening of the Hawkesbury Public Library, and there were some dignitaries there, and the mayor and some of the people on council, and it was delightful. And it's been a long time in the making, and it was quite a celebration. And I got some books off that, the first, the ones that are the cream of the crop, the early releases. I got a couple of books, so it was a lovely day. I saw Carolyn there.
Awesome. Eddie?
No report.
Gail?
No, I've just been following with interest the protests about the gas station and the issues again with the homeless. So yeah, I'm anxious to see that, hear about that.
Yeah. I also have been watching, because it's right down the street from me. And it is interesting, as that's been, it's interesting in the case that it's been zoned, that zoning, when it was developed, I don't know, 20 some years ago, maybe longer, Rick?
Yeah.
So, so it is interesting. So that'll be a fun update from Rick, I guess, or whoever on that, just so we have actually, as a planning commission, have absolutely nothing to do with that, or have any say about it. But you're going to get asked about it. There's no doubt. As a planning commission person, I've been asked numerous times in my neighborhood. But yeah, that's interesting. And of course, I tried to watch the council meeting where Rick was talking about the homeless situation. That was a long meeting. And so I had to jet out after a while, but I'm looking forward to the finished update on that. So I think that's everything from commissioners. Rick, were you going to have any people popping in for when Ryan does his report?
Yes, we may have some county staff show up and attend. They were invited. So Leah Davis may be attending tonight, but I don't see her in the attendees list yet.
Okay, so if we'll continue to watch for those folks. And director's report.
Nope.
That's you, Rick.
Tonight of all nights, I have no report. No, just kidding.
Oh, my God.
I've got a few things going on and happening as planning commission members have mentioned. So I'll try to hit about a few of them. Well, first off, that February 17th council meeting was a very long meeting. So sorry you had to run, Dave. I don't know why you couldn't keep me with you. The regular council meeting occurred, and there was the planning commission the council acted on a planning commission recommendation that Ryan presented regarding the parking ordinance amendments, specifically for multifamily parking, as well as the electric vehicle parking requirements as well. And council ended up adopting the planning commission recommendation for the multifamily parking standards. There was quite a bit of conversation about, is that enough still, kind of balancing, trying to be more site specific, and what about just parking? And of course, some of the conversation included, you have some places that haven't fully developed out around it yet. So do you over park? And then what do you do with that additional parking once you have the other parts of the other properties in the vicinity develop out as part of the plan goes? Yes, Dave?
I was just going to mention, as I was listening, I was at that meeting, and I thought it was interesting. Britain Parkway, that complex there, was ended up being talked about at length, as we all had talked about it. So
that was the primary example. And with this, of course, as Ryan shared with you guys throughout the process, and then these new parking standards, that would actually increase the number of parking spaces there, not by a grand amount, but it would have had a few more parking spaces than it currently does. On the EV parking requirements for charging stations, that did have a lot of discussion by the council, and actually had one motion that was presented that failed, and ultimately the council, with a split vote, approved a motion to accept the planning commission's recommendations, but changing the recommendation related to let's see, I think it was multifamily and lodging, where the planning commission recommendation was to require 10% of the parking spaces to have charging stations installed, to reduce that to 5%. So that was the one change that the council did make to the planning commission recommendation. And again, a lot of the conversation from some of the members of councils, those that were in the minority, were saying, well, the private sector is already meeting that need, and they'll be designing that to attract customers or businesses or tenants. And then, of course, those in favor of the proposal are saying, well, yes, but then also this also starts that process. And as we see more electric vehicles on the road going forward and sales, this just begins that process, very similar to bike standards and our bike space requirements and ADA standards. So you kind of see the council was had the same type of conversation the planning commission have, and then ultimately just went to a decision where they just reduced that 10% requirement down to 5%. Let's see. We also that night had the culmination of the homeless work group meeting recommendations, and to the council. So we had a few of our members of our work group there, and 2 of them presented their final recommendations. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail what the recommendations are, because I've looked to schedule a time, maybe the next planning commission meeting or the one after, where I can go through the presentation and the slide set with the in more detail, and take the time, because it'd probably be about a 15 to 30 minute presentation and conversation. So, but just as a quick snippet, the work group has been in process for over 18 months. They've had somewhere around 15 meetings, I believe, and many other ways of gaining information and community engagement. And the challenge of this process, and would be a virtual process with the type of topic that it is, that's very emotional, polarizing, and complex. Needless to say, the work group did not get down to a final plan and a consensus or unanimous decision or recommendation. So what they end up having is basically a series of recommendations to implement various principles and goals that they decided upon to address homelessness. And those were what was presented to the council that Thursday night. Some of the things that they looked at was continuing and validating what we've been doing with the community resource unit and mobile outreach team, and directly interacting with homeless individuals in the community and trying to connect them with services, reinforcing and supporting the micro housing as a mechanism for providing shelter. They didn't like the idea of tents, but the micro housing and tiny village type concepts with good oversight, management, and rules, very similar to what the Planning Commission worked on 3 years ago with the recommendation on a temporary encampment ordinance. So I have a feeling that recommendation will come back forward to council to see what they would want to do with that, or if they want to send it back to the Planning Commission for further conversation. But some of that validated that work the Planning Commission did a couple of years ago. And then also just trying to prioritize funding and regional coordination were the general themes. The challenge with the conversation at the council was because it was so polarizing, and we did start out with 30 work group members, which is a very large group to work with even in person. It dropped down to about 12 to 14 more active towards the end. And a couple of those were had frustrations with the process and strategies, and they voiced those concerns. So that part of that conversation at the council was working through that conversation, but the majority of the work group members in attendance appreciated the process and recognized that it wasn't perfect, but we got to some things that we can live with or can support as a whole. So it gave quite a bit for the council to chew on, and ultimately it's going to have continual work. We won't have the work group working on it directly anymore, but it's now handoff for staff to kind of pull together the documents and all that information and start having a series of meetings with council to finish it out. And it's going to have to be something that council is going to have to make those bigger decisions, since the work group couldn't get to anything unanimous. So it's going to be an ongoing process. And like I said, I'd like to bring these, reserve some agenda time for the Planning Commission to be able to go through the slides and actually talk about what those principles look like, that the work group decided upon, the goals, and then where those strategies are. And so there'll be more to come. Brought up the Northeast gas station. And, I'm not quite sure exactly when this particular property was zoned neighborhood commercial, but this is all part of the Meridian Campus Master Plan that was developed back in the late 80s. Prior to the city annexing it in, and the city reinforced those master plans and incorporated into our comprehensive plan in 1994. And so through that master plan, there's amendments throughout the years, and so this particular property could have been redesignated, probably could have been around 2003 as neighborhood commercial. But again, it's zoning and parameters in place for quite some time, as Dave has mentioned. And then of course, it's not a designation that, with that particular site specific, it's going to say, as we all know, what use is specific. It's going to be what's in the neighborhood commercial, which are several neighborhood commercial zones around the city. And so there are allowances for different types of uses at a more of a general neighborhood scale. And then there's a provision to allow other types of uses that may be a little bit more beyond the neighborhood scale, but could go through a conditional use permit to see if there's ways that could be mitigated or conditioned to fit that neighborhood character. And so that's what we have right now with the Meridian Campus gas station proposal. Is they're going through this conditional use permit process, try to identify what is the scale that relates back into that neighborhood area, that service area, and then also the design of it as well, and taking in all the different factors, including transportation, pedestrian safety. All those different things are part of the review that the city staff is doing that will ultimately make a recommendation to the hearing examiner, who will then have a public hearing, which is scheduled for April 4th. And at that public hearing, all the community will have the opportunity to speak, and the hearing examiner will make a recommendation to council based on the information in the hearing record, as well as the rules and regulations and ordinances of the city. So it's down on the tail end of its process. The challenge we have is there's a lot of conversation out in the neighborhoods, a lot of misinformation. And with the council also being involved in this process, they can't interact with the public because they are the final decision point. And because of being a quasi-judicial process, they cannot have ex parte communications, or they need to disclose if they do, to maintain their integrity in the process. But that's been a frustration too of the residents out there, because they want to have this direct interaction with council. And so that's kind of the tightrope we're walking right now, and trying to communicate what the process is, and make sure that we have the valid hearing and ultimately a good decision at the end of the day that's based off of the community vision and taking in those site specific issues that can be addressed through the authority of the conditional use permit process. Yes, Dave.
Could I ask I don't know how easy this would be, but just so the planning commission knows, that from where that new roundabout that used to be a four-way stop, 31st, from there on back into where Jubilee is, you'll see lots of these green corners. And I think almost every one of those corners has been cut out, like almost as these commercial, light whatever they are, the commercial light industrial kind of thing. So it's going to be this bigger issue is whether it's that lot or whether it's going to be another lot. I think it's going to rear its head a number almost every time, probably, that somebody wants to do something. Yeah. So I don't know what that really means, but if it's ever going to get fixed, maybe if it's just inappropriate now, the way it all got developed, maybe there in the future could be some kind of change. But obviously the way it is, I mean, right now it's a gas station market. I don't know, it could be a cleaners going in, or it could,
be a giant electrical charging corner.
Yep.
That's one of the challenges too, because you're right. There's another property that's I can't remember if it's north or south of this site that has a moderate density designation. There's going to be a multifamily project being proposed in that, but the corner is the neighborhood commercial or commercial piece. So there are these located along Willamette Drive. And part of the review of this particular case, and again, you got a lot of, as with any topic, you get the grapevine going, and people start speculating on worst case scenarios. I never was aware that a gas station could be the center of so much illicit activity has been conveyed through the public. Everything that you can think of is going to happen there. That's crimes against humanity. Which again, it's not to discount that, but again, there's this kind of fear that just kind of evolves. So as we're looking at a gas station, there are some concerns about a gas station in neighborhood commercial, because as you all see it around as your travels, gas stations come in various sizes, and they could be all the way up to a truck stop, on a freeway interchange, to a 12 pump gas station. Some are located on arterials that have different service models. And here, and I think one of the things we're looking at in our part review, when we stopped the clock to get more information from the applicant, was what is the market you're serving? Because if it's something that's going to be designed with say 8 pump stations, and really the market for a neighbor commercial scale is 4, we're going to work through that. And that's some of the things that the staff has been working with the applicant on, and actually reduce the initial scale of the gas pumps. But you also have the store portion that provides different convenience goods in addition to all your other things. So there's going to be a place for people to get, run to the store for the milk, so to speak, in a close proximity, and then the other retail pads associated with. So we are looking into that context of design and scale, and what is that market that a gas station is going to serve. And that's all going to come out as part of the staff report and record.
Can I add something, Rick?
Sure. And then we'll got Daphne with the question
Yeah.
too.
I just wanted to add in too that, just like Rick said, that the design, the scale, the character is absolutely something that we'll look at and is right in the wheelhouse of the hearing examiners to make a decision on. I'm a little personally concerned that nobody's focusing on that. It's all these other issues. And, the hearing examiner is that neutral party who will weigh both the staff recommendation and public comment in order to make that recommendation on what is the proper scale, what is the proper intensity of the use compared to the neighborhood. But what we're getting in right now is far afield from that, and like Rick said, kind of a little bit unnerving in the tone and insistence on that we're not doing a good job by doing our professional, giving our professional recommendation. So, sorry, Rick.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you, Grant. Daphne?
I was just wondering, with, I guess, the lack of specificity on the work group recommendations, when do you think we'll have actionable items on this? Because it's been a really, really long tail, and I assume the public's patience may wear thin a little bit, given the length of time here and then how much more work we're going to need to do through the city council. So, and city staff and such. So I'm kind of like, when do you think we're going to get to some actionable items? Like, how long a calendar?
That's what I'm actually working on right now is what does that schedule look like going forward? I'm at my closeout meeting, coordination meeting with the Athena group on Thursday. So we get the final deliverables from them, and then figure out, okay, how do we package the rest of the stuff together and build that time and get through the council conversations. Because one of the challenges is we had an hour-and-a-half work session period with the council, but we couldn't get into the mountains of information that the work group actually went through, or all that background information. And there's a lot of good stuff there and good examples from across the country as well as the state. We did early on in the process to try to give all the work group members awareness of the housing or the homeless issues. Is we had interviews with homeless individuals that were recorded, and they had a chance to listen to those or have speaking webinar, all this different information. So trying to figure out how to encapsulate that and get it through council so they have a little bit better grounding of why the work group landed where they did. And then what is it really effective strategies going forward that are responsible, that are fiscally doable, and all those different pieces. So hopefully when I come back with a more formal presentation, maybe I'll hopefully have just a general outline of a schedule or timeline to be able to answer that question.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? So, do you want to end on a good note related to homelessness, but with our activity with our community resource unit and the encampments here in front of the Ecology Building on Desmond Drive and Martin Way. Just last week, I was able to coordinate an agreement with Ecology. Ecology had some budgetary funds that they wanted to use to help individuals in the encampment adjacent to Ecology, that if they were trying to access services or housing or shelter of any means, that they could use this fund to help get them over the hump. So we signed that agreement last week, And within 2 days, one of the residents of the encampments there, or the individuals staying in the ecology property, who happens to have a job, we were able to use those funds already to get them, help them move into the Mark Apartments on Martin Way. And those funds were used to pay the first and last month's rent. So there's a success story right away with the assistance of ecology and the efforts of our community resource unit and mobile outreach team. But going back to Kieran's comment at the very beginning of the report out about that cost of housing and rents, there's an example of a barrier of that first and last month rent that a person that had a job couldn't quite come up with that amount of dollars right off the cuff to be able to move into an apartment without that assistance. And so that's another thing that came out of those homeless conversations, the homeless work group conversations, of these different pressures. How do you most effectively help people be able to stay in housing or get rehoused quickly once they lose it? So anyways, want to end on a good success story. And I'm going to save you. Grant wants me to tell a dad joke, but I'm not going to tell a dad joke tonight.
Oh, that is disappointing. All righty. With the ending of that, thank you, Rick. We will move on to new business, the Lacey Urban Growth Area Joint Plan 2016 Comprehensive Plan Review. Ryan, you're up.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, so we've had an update to the Lacey Urban Growth Area Joint Plan on the city or the Planning Commission's work program for a number of years now, and this finally is coming to a point where Thurston County is committing to going through the process to update the joint plan and to hopefully get that adopted. So purpose of tonight's meeting is to, first of all, I'm going to review kind of the main elements of that joint plan. I know most of the Planning Commission members, this goes back to 2015. So, you weren't on the Planning Commission when this was all happening. So it's going to be a good opportunity for you to get some information about our urban growth area and some of those major initiatives that are part of the joint plan. So I'm going to go through a presentation that we gave back in 2016 to the Thurston County Planning Commission about those major initiatives. And then we'll go into a little bit about the schedule and timing for this, as well as discuss some, and maybe pick your brains a little bit about some opportunities for additional public engagement. We did a huge engagement strategy with this last comprehensive plan update, but a lot of time has passed since then. And so we need to kind of re-engage people on this. And so wanted to maybe ask you what you're envisioning for that process as well. As Rick mentioned, we did invite staff from Thurston County. I don't see them here today, but this is a process that we will be working through hand in glove with Thurston County, because Thurston County does, even though we do the long range planning for urban growth area, they do all of the permitting and those kinds of things. So this is as mentioned, joint plan. So it's jointly adopted between both the city and the county. And so the county has a big role in this process as well. So with that, I'm going to get into the PowerPoint. Feel free to stop me anywhere along the way. Sometimes it can be hard when I'm sharing my screen to see us. So just go ahead and speak up and we'll get going on this. So again, this was a presentation we gave back in 2016. So some of the information is, getting a little stale, but the ideas and the information is generally still accurate. We started updating our comprehensive plan in 2009 to meet a 2016 mandated update deadline. And I think we adopted just shortly after that June 30th, 2016 update period. That was the first update that the city had done since 2008. Within the urban growth area for Thurston County, they are still operating under a 2003 comprehensive plan. So that comprehensive plan is almost 20 years old now and is overdue for an update. In fact, they had the same 2016 mandated deadline as we did, but they haven't been able to meet that that requirement. So we did a number of drafts of the actual comprehensive plan. We released one in 2013 and then did a wholesale update in 2015 based on community feedback. Just as a reminder, what the comprehensive plan includes, there's a number of elements there that we updated along the way. The ones with the stars are those that are joint planning elements. So things like our land use element, our housing element, and utilities element are all part of this, what we call the joint Lacey joint plan, the Lacey UGA joint plan. The other ones, including the economic development element, the environmental element, the regional sustainability plan, the JBLM joint land use study, and all those other things are all kind of adopted outside of the framework of the joint plan. And the joint planning elements with Thurston County are part of and recognized in our countywide planning policies. And so I did include in the packets for you tonight the countywide planning policy. So that really sets the framework for how this joint planning occurs. Basically, kind of what I said just previously, which is the city takes the lead on the long range planning side, and the Thurston County does the implementation through the land use permitting. Here's some kind of overall things about the document. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here, other than to say that the comprehensive plan was an extensive rewrite. It changed the format, it improved the clarity, the readability, the structure, and really went into more detail as far as the community vision, and with a true focus on implementation. And we have I think done a fantastic job in the last 6 or so years of doing the implementation part of this. So you'll see here in the presentation, it'll talk about focusing more development in what was then known as the Woodland District, around the Depot District area, Martin Way, those kinds of things. We're really starting to make movement on those things that you'll see here in a little bit. So I mentioned some of this information is getting a little stale, and here's a good slide that shows some of that staleness. First of all, our city limits is much larger than this now, and our population in 2015. Believe it or not, we were 42,390 people in 2015. I think we've probably grown almost 15,000 people since 2015, believe it or not. The unincorporated area, as we've grown, the unincorporated growth area is gotten smaller. The population has grown as well. I'm not exactly sure an updated population statistic on that. But when we say Lacey urban growth area, both the city limits and the urban growth area are part of that. When we say unincorporated urban growth area, that means the county's portion. So the whole growth area is this map here, both the black and white and the colored unincorporated urban growth area around it. So there was our 2015 population of 75,000 and change. So the history of the unincorporated portion of the urban growth area. So it was actually established, the Growth Management Act came around in about 1992, 1993, enacted by the state legislature to establish, one of the main facets of it was to actually establish urban growth areas. But Lacey actually had an urban growth area prior to that. It was established in 1988 by the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners. We had actually 2 urban growth areas at that time, one a short-term and one a long-term. And the idea was this would be the areas that the cities would provide utility services to outside of our city limits. So that identified a short and long-term urban growth area. And then this became our eventual urban growth area in 1993. So the urban growth area came around because of certain things. Number one, it was established. We have a large urban growth area, but the reason is because we have a number of pre-existing developments that are on the periphery of the urban growth area. We have a number of developed and vested residential development sites that were part of that. We had existing land use designations that they weren't, I would say they were suburban in nature. They weren't urban, but they weren't rural either. And the major theme behind why our urban growth area was so large, our unincorporated urban growth area was so large, was number one, because of environmental protection for groundwater, specifically within the McAllister Springs geologic sensitive area. So Growth Management Act says, you know, the cities are the utility providers, and those utility providers should they can't go any farther out than the unincorporated urban growth area. So really the idea is that, and why our UGA is so big, is because then we can provide it with sewer. We can't legally provide utilities, with very limited exceptions, outside of our boundaries of our UGA. So that's why our UGA is so big, is most of our water comes from this area. And in order to protect those groundwater resources, we need the sewer system in place to be able to protect that. Because the alternative is individual septics and drain fields, which can cause water pollution over time. So here's an aerial photo from 1990 showing the limits of the urban growth area. That red line is the UGA boundary. So on the right-hand side of that is the Nisqually Bluff, and you can kind of see down into the Nisqually Valley. So this is Interstate 5 on the north. And you can see some of the existing developments at the time. So this is part of, again, why our UGA is so large, is that you had a number of these developments that went all the way to the periphery of the urban growth area. This next one is a little bit farther to the south. So you can see kind of on the lower left, that's Capital City Estates. And then over to the right, all the way down, that's the UGA all the way down to Yelm Highway on that southern boundary. So here's McAllister Park, was just under construction in 1990. And you can see some of the other developments on the periphery of the UGA as well. So a lot has changed since 1990. If we put up a 2022 aerial photograph, I don't think you'd hardly recognize what this area looks like today. So what has changed in those intervening 25 years since that aerial photo was taken? First of all, we have a large unincorporated urban growth area, as I mentioned. It does have available land resources and large vested residential developments. It has very limited commercial and economic development opportunities. So our urban growth area is primarily residential in the unincorporated urban growth area. Really, the only commercial area is on the Martin Way corridor, essentially between Carpenter Road and Galaxy Drive. So very limited economic development opportunities. It's pretty much all residential, and will develop out as such. And that's why within our planning horizon for this plan, we were projected to see most new residential units within the unincorporated urban growth area. So we're projecting that the growth of the city in terms of residential development will actually slow down as that development capacity gets taken up here in the unincorporated urban growth area. And what this slide here shows, this is a population projection provided by Thurston Regional Planning Council. The population of the urban growth area will actually exceed the population of the city by the year 2035. So you can see, our city limits line kind of, our population kind of plateaus by about the year, well, about now, almost 2025. But the population in the unincorporated urban growth area will continue to increase. That's because, as I just mentioned, most of those large developments in the city have been developed or will be developed within this next planning horizon. And we're seeing that. In fact, I think it's happened even faster than what we've projected in terms of development within the city limits. And that means we'll shift from greenfield development in the city to more infill and redevelopment. We've been talking about that quite a bit in the last number of years. So we did a large outreach campaign as part of the update to our comprehensive plan. And this was our kind of problem statement and our vision. So our problem statement was that we needed to accommodate 30,000 people, 12,500 homes, plus jobs and services. How do we do that in the next 20 years while also maintaining and improving the quality of life? And so I'll kind of go through some of those things here in the presentation about how we do that. So community vision is articulated in a number of kind of bullet statements or goals within the comprehensive plan. So first of all, create a community of diverse and vibrant neighborhoods that contain a mixture of uses, which that's an interesting topic based on what we just talked about on Meridian campus, that we have housing, a variety of housing types, convenient commercial opportunities. So commercial opportunities in and around our neighborhoods, schools, parks, and open spaces. Ensuring that we have a diversification of employment opportunities in Lacey, so Lacey residents can work, live, shop, and play all within close proximity. So again, having all of those things so that we're not just a bedroom community, right? So that we're not just serving, houses here to serve, employees that'll go to Pierce or King County, that we have all these things contained within our own community. And then also focus growth to targeted areas for infill so that, number one, it conserves vacant buildable land at the periphery of the UGA, but also increases density for areas with a range of transportation alternatives and conserves resources related to extension of infrastructure. And you can see on this map here, it's a little hard to see, but this is some of the things I'll touch on here in a little bit, but those big things as far as where we're going to see more growth. And A, Martin Way Corridor, B, Woodland District, our Central Business District, which is now known as the Depot District, Lacey Gateway, and then also within the UGA. And then also making sure that we have a coordinated transportation system that serves all modes. So we did a significant amount of outreach. Planning Commission may be aware of some of these things that we did back in the day, but we held open houses at City Hall. We got on TV with Paul Enns. Paul was our former Planning Commission chair there in the upper right, hosted me on the PCTV at Panorama. The middle there is a postcard to our Planning Commission on the road meetings that we did. So we actually went out into the unincorporated urban growth area and did a number of Planning Commission on the road meetings. And then those bottom two slides were events that we went to in the community. So we had community booths to get more outreach on this as well. And those from about 2013 to 2015. So when we did that outreach, what did we hear? First of all, we got a lot of questions on population and employment growth. People thought we were a little too aggressive when it came to what our population growth would be. And it's kind of funny to look back on this now and think, well, I don't think we were maybe even aggressive enough. I think we've grown so much in the last 5 or 6 years that we've exceeded those population projections. The second bullet there is the balance between growth and the quality of life. Obviously, we're growing fast. How do we maintain a quality of life? Concerns about higher densities. We've heard that. The Planning Commission has heard those concerns over time as well. Heard a lot about wages. Wages at the time, and maybe this is changing, maybe not, is that wages definitely were not keeping pace here in Thurston County with those in other more urban counties like King and Pierce County. We were hearing people say, hey, I've got an IT job that I can make $40 an hour in King County, but I can only make $17 or $18 here in Thurston County. So what do? I choose to drive. And so we were hearing a lot from people that slept in Lacey, that lived in Lacey, in the evenings and the weekends, but they didn't really feel connected to the community because they really spent the bulk of their time at their job. And maybe those things are changing. I don't know. That was certainly an issue back in 2015. Transportation issues that, just as I mentioned, a lot of commuting issues with I-5 and those kinds of things. And, transportation issues with pedestrian bicycle, connections and those kinds of things. We've done a pedestrian bicycle plan since this was adopted. So that's an important element to address some of those things. Better interjurisdictional coordination. So that's coordination between us and Thurston County has been brought up as a large issue. Plan for an aging population. Obviously, we have a large baby boomer population that is growing in size. And then finally, increasing public access to lakes brought up as an interesting item. People wanted more public amenities at our lakes, which can then be, that can be incorporated into more of our parks planning element. So we have several key issues. I'm going to talk about a few of them here. The one that I don't have a specific slide on is the first one, which is agriculture zones. Just so the Planning Commission's aware, we do have some properties zoned agriculture in our urban growth area, which is quite contrary to the Growth Management Act, which says the cities and the UGAs should be urban. And the rural area should be where we have those agriculture uses. So this is one thing we'll need to take a look at through the joint plan update, is to see if those properties are still zoned appropriately. Agriculture uses, again, aren't something that's a high priority for cities to have, or even within your urban growth area. So we'll be taking a look at that. So, one of the things that I just kind of hit on here is joint planning and coordination, and how important that is for the city to plan in coordination with Thurston County, because the development regulations, they really need to be updated regularly to implement the comprehensive plan. As I've mentioned, Thurston County has not done a lot of, well, they haven't adopted our joint plan, nor have they really kept a lot of their development regulations up to date since 2003. And so it creates inconsistency between what we have on the books in the city, but also what's on the books in Thurston County. And that can create projects like this, which is on your screen here. This is the Gateway Division 2A and 2B project that was permitted in Thurston County. We later came along and annexed it. But this is on property that's zoned for moderate and high density residential. And the county zoning for moderate and high density residential allows at the base level 6 units per acre. Ours does not. For moderate density, it's 8. For high density, it's 12 units per acre. And so on these properties that are zoned this way in the city, that really precludes them from being able to subdivide into single family subdivisions. It did not, however, within Thurston County, because they were able to develop out at 6 units to the acre. And so you have basically a moderate or a high density residential neighborhood built out at 6 units to the acre. And so if we are to continue to develop at this rate, we've shown through our work that's in the comprehensive plan, if we're to continue to develop out at 6 units to the acre in the UGA, we're going to run out of available property really quick. So one of the things that will be a major implementation item coming out of the comprehensive plan update is to change the Thurston County regulations to make sure it's up to date with ours, so that those higher density zones are zoned truly for higher densities.
Brian, can I interrupt? What is the reason for the county being maybe at a different pace than the city? Is it, staffing constraints they've had? Is it the vision for the county is different than the vision for the city? Or, is it a number of things? What kind of caused the disconnect historically?
I think it's a number of things. I think, we've talked a lot to the county about this. I think number one, it hasn't been maybe as high of a priority for them as it has been for us to get completed. And, they are more focused on updating the plan for the rural county. They've also been very focused on like pocket gopher issues that have been emerging, and a large update to their shoreline master program. And so their staffing resources have been taken up with other long range plans. And so it hasn't been as high of a priority for the county because they've had other higher priority plans. The good news is they've confirmed they've got the staffing to be able to do this in the next year to year and a half. And so we're getting moving on this now. It's a little late, and our next update is due in 2025. So our next update is right around the corner. And we're just helping them catch up to this 2016 update right now. So I think it's a combination of things, but really I think the good news is right now the county's committed to completing this work.
Great, thank you.
Another major topic is exploring what we are terming urban holding areas. So this would explore looking at areas around Pleasant Glade. So that's the the red circle kind of in the upper left of that map, and the McAllister geologic sensitive area, the red circle on the lower right of that map, because they are with limited sewer service. And the idea with putting these areas into the urban growth area, as I mentioned in the kind of the onset of the presentation, was that these areas could be sewered eventually and would help protect groundwater and other water, surface water resources. But frankly, they are not much closer to being sewered now than they were 20 years ago. And so the idea is, should they be part of the urban growth area if they are being sewered, or, you know, if we're not doing large capital projects to put in sewer? And the way sewer extensions work is we really rely on development to be able to put those sewer services in. The city doesn't do capital projects very often to extend service to certain areas. We've done more in the recent past with some of the septic issues like at Capital City and some other places, but for the most part, we don't do large capital projects to install sewer. And so the idea would be these would actually be pulled back from the urban growth area and basically kind of be put on hold. They've been just like that terminology states, urban holding area, that basically, you know, it would not allow for any additional development until the time they were put back into the urban growth area. And so it puts them in kind of a holding pattern. And then if the UGA was ever expanded again, they would be the first priority to be able to expand into. So this would have to be done with a robust public participation campaign. This is something that we'd definitely work on with the county. The way the UGA amendments actually functions is that the only body, or the final decision-making body when it comes to UGA extensions and retractions, is the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners. So our city council can't actually make changes to the UGA boundaries. That is something that's a function of the county. Martin Way is another, we mentioned Martin Way as a focus area for more intensive development over time in a way that we can help meet our growth projections. As mentioned here in the slide at the time, there's 85 acres of vacant or redeveloped development able property within the Martin Way corridor. And so the good news is that since this presentation, we've got a large grant through TRPC to do the Martin Way corridor study, which you've been briefed on, and we'll come back to you here in the next little bit to give you another update on that. But it will help better identify some of those barriers and issues to development along Martin Way, and also look at our zoning regulations to make sure they're in line with the vision for the area. And then finally, look at some of the transportation challenges along the corridor. So things like, street crossings and sidewalks, bike lanes, and then also look at the transit component along Martin Way as well. It's a joint project with Intercity Transit. Speaking of transit or transportation issues, I guess, is that making sure that we have transportation infrastructure that adequately serves existing residents, are improved to keep pace with growth projections, and that we provide a full range of transportation items or options. And really, we're talking about the unincorporated urban growth area here, because we want to make sure that we're consistent between Lacey's and Thurston County's transportation elements. As we're mentioning before, transportation is not something that's planned with part of the joint plan. We do plan jointly with Thurston County, but it's not part of the joint plan. Where this really comes up is in these large projects that are in the urban growth area. That the one here I'll show you is this Oak Preserve project, which is now well underway. It's the age restricted project that is off Marvin Road, south of Pacific Avenue, just north of the railroad tracks. A ton of units, over 1,000 lots at the time, that were all developed along a corridor that looks like this. So this is Marvin Road, and it probably looks fairly similar to this today. Is that Marvin Road and other county corridors have not been developed to handle the amount of growth that will eventually occur along these corridors. And so you're getting, at this point, a lot of transportation concurrency issues, things like intersections and other things that are failing level of service standards. So it's putting pressure on Thurston County to have to do something to fix this because there wasn't a lot of things done beforehand to address transportation issues. So now it's becoming a real concern. It's also becoming a concern because some of these things can affect city development projects as well. When we're doing permitting and showing vehicle trips along Marvin Road in areas that are substandard, that don't have multiple lanes, it can cause concurrency issues, which can then have those things need to be ironed out prior to permit issuance. So it can cause a lot of consternation, we'll say, between city and county staff to iron these things out. Getting just about to the end here, septic issues. So this is probably, if there is the largest thing that would be the heaviest lift for Thurston County to accomplish, it would be this, which would be that we connect all new development within the urban growth area to sewer, and that we partner up to do more to connect more people to sewer. And the city council has certainly committed to doing this. This map shown on your screen here in orange and in red, I guess too, are those areas that are of the highest concern for ground and surface water protection in the UGA. And you can see this is a map of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, and you can see far and away that where these issues are the biggest is within our urban growth area. Most of these areas are on septic systems developed in the 60s and 70s. So, and they are the closest to our existing city limits boundaries. So just to the east of our city limits boundaries. So as I mentioned, again, a heavy lift which would be that all new development would require sewer, would increase density, and then this would protect those groundwater resources and ensure that land supply is developed to its highest potential. The other part of this would be to require septic systems that have failed to connect to city sewer. We largely already do this. If your septic system has failed and you're within 200 feet of an existing line, you're required to connect. So just making sure that those policies are in place and are set fairly firmly, because this is such a high priority area for the purposes of ground surface water protection. So those were the big issues of the time, and they continue, and they will be the big issues moving into the joint plan. I'll just hit on this real quick. We've already gone through all of these steps, but we did issue an environmental impact statement for our plan, and we, like I mentioned, we achieved that, and we achieved the eventual adoption by the city council. As mentioned here, it will have to go through the Thurston County Planning Commission and eventually be adopted by the Board of County Commissioners as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and take a breath and answer any questions.
Ryan, can I ask a question about the mushroom farm? The
Yeah.
last I heard, that was going to go residential. That's in our urban growth area, correct?
Not anymore.
Or
It's
no,
been annexed.
that got annexed. Okay, that's part of that annex.
Yep.
And so that means there is sewer there, right? No problem.
Well, I'm not exactly sure. Ostrom's was not on city sewer, so we'll have to extend sewer to a future residential development there. That property is zoned for low density residential, so it would be a single family subdivision if and when it would be developed. My understanding is that there have been discussions about sale of that property to residential developers, but I'm not aware of any pending projects. Actually, I do believe we've had a pre-submission conference on a residential development there. So we've had some interest, but at this time there's nothing formal that's pending.
And is that 50 homes, 100 homes? How big a space is that?
It's pretty big. Yeah, I think it was in the neighborhood of a couple hundred houses.
And I'm thinking, Lot's able to handle all of this happening. I mean, Lot appears to be doing some expansion down at their main facility. They're they're going to be able to handle this growth?
So, what Lot has done, my understanding with Lot, so just so the planning commission's aware, when it comes to sewer, there's kind of two entities that are involved. The first is the city, and the city does the collection. So we actually do the actual sewer piping, but we don't do the treatment. Lot is who does the treatment. My understanding is that as more low flow shower heads and toilets and those kind of washing machines, as those have come along, Lot's flows have actually gone down over time. And so they will have to accommodate additional growth with their treatment, but it's not happening as fast as they originally anticipated. The good thing for the city is that, and for us doing planning, is that we don't necessarily have to worry about Lot's capacity. That is a lot issue. They come to us for permitting and those kinds of things, and we obviously have coordination with our water resources group with them, and we do have a city council person that sits on the Lot board. But as far as their expansion plans and those kinds of things, that is all handled by Lot staff and that Lot board.
Okay. Mark, you're on mute, Mark.
Excuse me. I remember when we spoke about near the Capital City Golf Course, that whole development, and they waived the hookup fees, I believe. Is that also taking place for that community up north of Hawkesbury? I know there was a group up there that was at, I think, for the same kind of permission.
That this the Tommy Estates LID project.
Right.
Okay. I believe that there is a buy down on some of those connection fees, Chuck, but do you know that information, Ryan?
I don't think it's the same thing as Capital City. They are doing it through an LID process. That's a local improvement district process that's going to tax those residents. My understanding is that the city is paying for a certain amount that is going to be, offset some of that cost of that LID, but not 100% like we were paying down Capital City.
That's correct. Capital City was a combination because of the public need for protecting the water supply and the issue with the local well sourcing there, where Tommy Estates is taking our traditional LID process where there may be a buy down in some of those connection fees to encourage people to develop, but they still have the financing plan of the LID to pay for that conversion.
Thank you.
Yes, Eddie.
Ryan, I don't know if you were planning to cover this after this little question period, but can you lay out for us what our role is going to be? I know there was a work plan on the last page of the packet, but what exactly are we going to do, and how is that going to work between us and the county?
Yeah, do you want me to share my screen, or do you guys have that available? That was going to be the next part of what I was going to talk about. Maybe I'll share my screen, and so we can all look at that together. So this was a draft work plan that was given to me by staff at Thurston County. And the reason I provided it to you was it does give you some kind of insights into what this process would look like. The thing is with this process, I think it's a little too aggressive to achieve what we need to set out to do in this timeline to get it done by December for adoption by the Board of County Commissioners. So what you're seeing at the top is that, first of all, we'll need to basically get a draft together of the joint plan. So there will be a separate document that will be called the joint plan that will only really have those things that apply to the unincorporated urban growth contained within it. So that plan needs to be put together, and we have not yet had a chance to there's a draft that that Thurston County has provided with us, but we have, as staff, have not had the opportunity yet to go through that. So that's what we need to do to start this off, and that's that February to March timeframe. I think it's going to be longer than that. Obviously, we're already into March. So then that brings us into, and my feeling is, I think at this point, then we need to do some public outreach, right? We need to remind people of what it was contained within the joint plan. And so that's where I'd be happy to get feedback from the Planning Commission, given that we did such a robust effort and really reached out a lot to our urban growth area residents. I'm sure that nobody remembers what we talked about 6 years ago. So, what does that look like? So we'll need to build in some time here to be able to do some outreach. The next step and this is where the Planning Commission comes in, is that will require joint review between the city's Planning Commission, so you, and Thurston County's Planning Commission, and culminate in a joint public hearing. And so for the Planning Commission, that means a series of briefings, probably 2, prior to a public hearing, which will be at a date to yet be determined. So that's where you all come in, as you help us with holding these joint meetings with Thurston County. Then after that, there'll be a recommendation made, and we'll get that together, and then it goes to the county for their formal review through their Board of County Commissioners. So that is the overall process. I'll stop sharing at this point. But really, the question for the Planning Commission is, what are your ideas for public outreach? Because that'll really be the next step in this after we have a draft together of the plan. And what can that look like? And do you have any ideas for that?
Well,
go
ahead.
How much of the outreach, I guess, who does that? Is that the city or the county, or like? The reason I ask that is because I know we've had some success with the virtual open house kind of idea. Is that something, if the county is doing it, would they have access to the same materials and infrastructure that the city has used?
Yeah, and in fact, if you look at our countywide planning policies, it says that the city takes the lead for the joint plan. And so really, it will be us as city staff leading those discussions and leading that outreach with the participation of the Thurston County staff. So we'll have access to everything.
Okay, thank you.
So I do think that the virtual open houses have been very successful, simply because people can access them when they have time to look at things, as opposed to, come at 7 o'clock to your local fire station and we'll talk to you. So that would certainly be one way to do the outreach. And before it seems to me we went around to various sort of quasi-public venues and presented a lot of things, but we had relatively small audiences, it seems.
Right. Yeah.
I think some of the outreach might depend on the restrictions or the lack of restrictions now around the pandemic. Like, are there going to be, will there be street events in Woodland Park in the summertime? I think that's a nice venue because people stop in there and come to the movies on Tuesday night and so forth. There was a postcard that went out that was that had key bullet points. I knew that was Jennifer, I think, was part of that. So those are a couple more ideas. And the lovely park where the food trucks go, those are their locations where people gather. It's a good place, an obvious place, library and so forth. Just commenting.
I would add, I think there needs to be some level of helping the public understand who this affects. And I think that's a big problem with urban growth. Is, is this city, is this me? Am I part of does my opinion count or not? I honestly would love us to get back out into the public, and I would love us to get into maybe some schools or something that are in the urban growth area versus the city, and connect in that way, where you're close to the urban growth areas. So I think it needs to be important to really let the public know who's involved, whose opinion is what we're seeking. So
one thing, if I can add, is what's been valuable or silver line with the COVID is the experiment and exercise of some of the online or virtual open houses. And I think it is a nice tool, but not by itself, like the planning commission discussed. I think there's a way you can probably have some of the in-person events and schedule it so you have the online virtual going on at the same time for a longer period of time. So it's always that opportunity for people to learn more or have more interaction. Because one of the challenges I think in, like, if you have a one-day event, they leave, how do you get them to come back and look at more information, get all that information at that time? So we can kind of do some type of hybrid where we kind of incorporate the strengths of both to try to get the word out and why people should be commenting and learning about what the long-term plans are for their area. Why is that the zone residential or commercial, and what does that really mean?
Yep, Gail.
I'm not sure that people, I think people who live in the city limits know they live in the city limits. And I think other people think they live in the county. I'm not sure who knows they live or don't live in the urban growth area or what that is or what that means. And so maybe that we need to do some basic education there before we ask people's opinions.
I agree with that completely. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Again, if we go to city-focused events, yeah, I think we have to kind of think about like who our audience are. If we're going to something at Huntermar Park that we're really, going to focus on, city residents, that might confuse people because, we're really only talking to the residents of the UGA when it comes to this. So what I'm thinking too is that we might, and we really like that planning commission on the road thing, is that when we look at doing these joint meetings, we might actually, if we're able to, hold them in a location out in the urban growth area so people can come to us. Now, I don't know how that works as far as, hybrid meetings probably takes that off the table. It probably would be that we would have to go 100% in person for those. But I think that's maybe something that could help is, and make things a little bit more accessible is by having those joint meetings in a school somewhere around the urban growth area.
Well, even things like,
I like the idea with education. I think, one of the things too that we've come a long ways in terms of technology, things like story maps and those kinds of things that could be used to help create a little bit more of a public education campaign as far as, what this would mean for somebody that lives in the urban growth area. Where is the urban growth area? How do UGAs work? That kind of stuff, kind of a 101 type primer on that. I think that sounds really interesting. I think that might be helpful.
And we need to do that, start it now, though,
Yeah,
before we get into it.
That's
Right.
something that we've been talking about, and I've been talking about with public affairs is and it's something too, it's in addition to, and we need to do it for this effort of joint planning, but it's also we need to do this type of work just as a resource for the broader community outside of the comp plan update too, because what we're finding is as our population grows, a lot of people came to this area within the last 3-5 years. A lot of them from out of state don't have the understanding of all the planning history within the state and how it all works. And so trying to make context with this joint planning effort update is important, but we also are looking at working with public affairs to figure out how we can have a basic information for the community so they understand what the processes are happening around, not only with the comp plan, but also like we have right now with this conditional use permit process for the Meridian Market and gas. How do you interact with your government too? So I think we can do a lot of work this spring to set that up, both for the project at hand, but also for something continuing forward as a general community information piece.
I think there's an element of the UGA and the county not connecting because we're not, the city council members aren't people we vote for. There aren't anything. So I think there's a natural level of disconnect and where they will disconnect. So I think kind of going a little old school with, maybe even, Sanders board signs and other kinds of things that just, in the neighborhoods and stuff. But I would agree, whoever said we should start the campaign, the education campaign as soon as possible.
Okay.
Get there that it's coming.
Okay.
Yes, following up on Daphne's thinking there, is there a link that we've used with the public school system in the UGA to get the word out to families of these kinds of opportunities to, if you hold a public gathering at the fire station or wherever, with storyboards, can it be advertised through the schools? Or has it ever been done that way?
We can check in with the school district to see if that's something we can do some joint messaging on. I know in the past, dating myself when we would put flyers out that go home to parents, but I know today that technology schools districts have, the robocalls, the text, all the different ways that they ping parents about events happening. We can check with them to see if that's something that their system can be used for and it's something that meets their policies.
You almost want to have a map that says, do you live in this circle or this circle or this circle? If you live in this circle, you're in the city. If you live in this circle, you're in the UGA, and have a web address that says, go to this web address. It's going to tell you what's important to you about planning in your particular area, and hand those out at, Costco or someplace where everybody goes. It doesn't matter where they live. We all go to Costco, and you'll get people from every area that is affected, I would think. I don't know if Costco will let you do that, but it seems to me to be a sort of simple way to, get the basic word across to people that there are some differences and they need to pay attention, and then direct them to somewhere where they can get the basic facts.
We could all put stickers on our car that says Lacey Hearts are UGA or something. Okay.
Yep. So that's what I had for you tonight. I have some great ideas there, and I think that gives us some things to go on, and we'll be touching bases back with you here in the next few months as far as where we're at on things and getting things scheduled for joint meetings and those kinds of things. So thanks for your time.
All righty. I just wanted to mention something under communication and announcements. I have noticed, and I have no idea how to find out, maybe Rick has some way of finding out, or maybe Councilman Cox, because she's involved in the inner city transit, but I've noticed a lot more people riding and standing at bus stops in Northeast Lacey. So I'd be interested finding out some ridership numbers, how that's been going, and if it's doing anything. But I have seen for about 4 months there, I didn't see anybody standing at bus stops, but I'm seeing them now. So it's exciting for me to see that happening. So
it's not just the Northeast Lacey either, Dave. I see that
everywhere.
Like there were, not too long ago where I'd be driving down thinking, what is that person doing standing there? And then I'm like, once I realized, oh, they're waiting for the bus. Now I see them all the time, and it doesn't draw my attention. But for a while there, I was like, why is that person just standing there? I didn't even realize, that there was a bus stop. But I think you're right. I think there's a lot more people using the system now.
People are going back to the office, and gas prices have gone sky high. So both of those things.
I've noticed the same thing out in the Northeast area, and we can see what we can get for ridership for the route. We'll see if we can follow up with a report at the next meeting. And the other thing too is, with people going back to work, I mean, it's dependent on what classification of employer is what your work dynamic shift is. So, for instance, I think the state, they're going to still continue with a large percentage are going to be telecommuting
At home.
outside after this effort. And we're going to have more telecommuting options, I think, here at the city, just because we were able to adjust through the pandemic and kind of get that system in place. But there are a lot of businesses that aren't going to have that. And a lot of the success we've had out in the Northwest Lacey in terms of employers and job opportunities, those are pretty much in place, in on-site jobs. And so one of the things that we still have to work on is how do we continue to provide options for transportation for people to get to work. And there's potentially an effort from TRPC and some grant cycles coming up that maybe looking at some type of study or work to do other types of commute trip reduction efforts focusing out in that Northeast area. The challenge we have is we go through a grant process. We don't have the capacity at this point to take on that work, but it is something that is on everybody's radar and trying to time it appropriately.
Oh, go ahead, Rick. Finish up.
Well, no, I have a different communication announcement for off
Okay.
the transit topic.
So I was just going to mention to everyone that if you're interested in Thurston Regional Planning Policy Board on Transportation, they're looking for some people to be on that group. So it's the Transportation Policy Board. It's a subcommittee of the Thurston Regional Planning Council. And they're seeking two community representatives and 3 business representatives for that. So if you know somebody that might be interested, it would be well worth sending them that direction, because we know Lacey is a big part of that transportation flow.
And,
Okay, Rick.
Well, that was it. I think I sent an email out to all the planning commission members too with more information if you have a link to it. And also, we have the Transportation Policy Board. A lot of times, regional transportation, it talks about freight, commute trips, but also bicycle, all modes of transportation. So anybody with a diverse perspective, please let me know, and we can get you the information to participate. Or if you know somebody, the mayor is also on the Transportation Policy Board. So there's if anybody wanted to, we can always pass that information along to him and get the application process to you.
So, okay, Peg.
I just wanted to mention I'm going to be on vacation and I will be returning to Washington on the 15th, but I will not be available until late in the evening. So I will miss the next meeting. I'll be in Arizona. Yes. Sun, warm.
Yeah, good.
So I'll show you my tan when I get back next meeting.
I'm personally just happy that, Ryan has work. I was really worried that they were going to run out of stuff to work on. So I'm
Right.
glad you have work.
Okay, Eddie.
Yeah, just a question. I know, I don't know if we have any guidance yet from the city council, but any ideas on in-person or hybrid meeting and where that stands?
Yes. So there was a brief conversation about it at the last Thursday night's work session. And at that point in time, I believe the governor's date for easing restrictions was the 21st, and it's now moved up to the 12th. So they're looking at after the 21st, based on that type of conversation, of transitioning to their next meeting to be a hybrid, probably in April. And so we will be working with our public affairs and assistant city manager offices to figure out what are those protocols. And we would expect that we would offer that as an option for the planning commission meetings going into April after the council holds their first hybrid meeting. And so that still would be, people would have the choice to participate in person or through the virtual environment. And the things I want to try to hone in on from public affairs is what are they looking at in terms of protocols? Because in the past, we still had the mask mandates and social distancing requirements. And so we would have to manage occupancy of the in-person physical space, but we're not sure what we're planning going forward. So I gotta find out what some of those protocols could look like before we get a full report and what we're trying to do. And then we do have one other thing. We do have another planning commission that'll be coming on board. The council did appoint a gentleman by the name of Alex Baum. He couldn't make it tonight, but he will be attending at the next planning commission meeting as well. So we'll have 8 of the 9 seats filled, and we're still recruiting for the 9th seat, and we're working with all the various other arms of the city to try to get the word out and try to get another pool of candidates to consider.
All righty. Anything else? So I would like to thank staff. Another great meeting. Great job. Great information. Commissioners, thank you for your service to the Planning Commission. And thank you, for representing all the citizens of Lacey. And our next meeting is March 15th, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Fun, Peg.
Happy Mardi Gras.